Today, we'll be learning some of the terms and the measurement systems that we use when we work with typography. And this is the most important thing really that you can learn in your quest to become a designer, because as the years progress and software upgrades and we use different tools, a knowledge of type and an understanding of the terms of type will stick with you because these things do not change. In fact, typography and the terms that we will be learning today are based on centuries of practice from what was once a massive industry employing many, many thousands of people all over the world. Those were the days of lead type, when every single word that was printed on paper had to be composed in metal type and physically impressed into the paper. We don't use those technologies as much anymore, although some people still do, but we do use the terms. So let's take a look at a little bit of the history. For example, most of us in elementary school, when we learned to write, heard the terms uppercase and lowercase. Those terms came from typography, and the original letters were placed in a typecase like the one you see here. And the capital letters were in the top case, the uppercase, and the lowercase letters were in the bottom case. And that's where those terms came from. One of the first things to learn is the difference between a typeface and a font, or a type font. Many people use these terms interchangeably, but they have different meanings. A typeface, sometimes also called a type family, is a family of related fonts in various weights and styles. So a typeface, such as Garamond, Helvetica, or Baskerville, will have a number of constituent fonts. And as you can see here, there's really no standard number of fonts that are required to make up a typeface, and some typefaces only have one font. Characters are the individual letters, punctuation, and other symbols that make up a type font. Even the most basic digital typefaces have more than 250 characters. OpenType, TrueType, and more recently produced typefaces will often have thousands, including many alternate characters such as ligatures, swatch characters, small capitals, and alternate styles of figures. Whenever we work with type, we work with a unique system of measuring, as far as I know, not used by anyone but typographers and graphic designers: points and picas. You may be already familiar with points because the developers of word processing software such as Microsoft Word adopted the typographic system of points and picas. So when you open up Microsoft Word and it shows you that your type size is 12, that's 12 points. I recommend getting yourself a ruler like the ones you see here that show you the comparisons between points and picas and inches and give you a physical reference for how large your type will be when it is printed on a piece of paper if you're designing for print. And these rulers come in many styles. Wherever you live, you'll probably be able to find one. An important part of becoming a designer is developing your artist's eye. And one way to do that is to really study different typefaces and start to look for the differences in design. The first step in classifying typefaces is just to see the difference between serif and sans serif. And serifs are simply the little feet that you see on the bottoms of the letters and the tags that you see on the top. There are many, many different styles of serifs which originated in different historical periods. We will maybe talk about that in a future video. But for today, we're just going to look at the difference between serif typefaces and sans serif that do not have the feet on the bottom or the tags on the top. When you look at serif and sans serif typefaces to develop your artistic eye, you'll notice immediately some differences besides the presence and absence of serifs. One would be that the body of sans serif letters tends to be larger, And the size of the body of a letter, which is the height of a lowercase letter, is called the X height. And in general, sans serif typefaces are larger and serif typefaces are smaller. You'll also notice a difference in the way that thick and thin strokes are distributed. You can clearly see that in a serif typeface, there's a great deal of contrast between thick and thin, and that contrast, while it still exists, is much less generally in a sans serif typeface. It's a great way to develop your artist's eye to carefully study your favorite typefaces and observe how the thicks and thins are distributed. Type is measured not by the size of the letters themselves, but on the total vertical space that a line of type will occupy on a page. So from the top of, say, the L to the bottom of the Y is actually what is being measured in points, and you can clearly see that 72-point Helvetica appears to be much larger than 72-point Caslon. Here you can compare 3 different type fonts in 72-point, and you can see that in impact, the tail of the Y has been shortened tremendously to allow for a larger X height in the 72-point size. The standard text type sizes are between 14 and 8-point, although most text type is either 10 or 11-point, and that's a good place to start. Anything larger is considered a display, headline, or decorative type, and anything smaller is very, very difficult for most people to read. Leading is the space between lines of type, and it's measured in points from baseline to baseline. Baseline is simply the invisible line upon which letters sit. The mean line describes the top of the lowercase letter. We also have an ascender line, which marks the top of the tallest letter, such as an L, a cap line, which shows the height of the capitals, and in most typefaces, the capitals are just a little bit shorter than the ascenders, and the descender line, which shows the bottom of the descender on a letter such as this Y. The term leading comes from the era of lead type, when strips of lead were placed between the lines of letters to increase the line spacing and make type more readable. Leading is specified in points. Standard leading is the point size plus 20%. And when your point size is equal to your leading, you can see the lines become too close together, as on the left here. Standard point size plus 20% makes the type quite readable. And if you have the luxury of short settings of type, loose leading can look very elegant and be very attractive. All fonts are not created equal. There's a great variation in the special characters and glyphs available in different type fonts. If we look in the Glyphs panel, which you can find under the Type menu in either InDesign or Illustrator, you'll see that the Modern Glyphs panel has a dizzying profusion of characters, and those can include ornaments, swatch characters, ligatures, small capitals, and various figure styles. Let's look at a few of these examples. Almost every typeface will have an ampersand, but there will be a great variety in the way ampersands look. It is the abbreviation for the Latin word et, and I think you can see that very clearly in, for example, the Garamond italic ampersand or the New Baskerville ampersand. We can kind of see the roots of the character, and I love this character because it seems to be a place where type designers kind of let themselves go and have a little bit of fun. The punctuation and special characters that are a part of every standard typeface can look very different between typefaces. If you compare, for example, the section mark in Garamond Regular and Universe, you can see they look quite a bit different. Ligatures are a special character that fuses two characters, and the reason for a ligature is that it solves a spacing problem. If you look at this top line, which has no ligatures, you can see that the TH has a little bit too much space, and here the F and the I are kind of colliding. Likewise, the F and the L, or the FF, looks a little too spaced out. And when we go down and look at ligatures, you can see that those problems are solved by fusing those characters. And these are special characters that are not standard among typefaces, meaning some typefaces will have no ligatures, some will have just one or two, and others may have a dozen or more. Swash characters are based on Renaissance calligraphic forms. This example on the left is by the great Renaissance calligrapher Palatino. You can most frequently find these in OpenType Pro italic fonts, and they can be a great deal of fun to work with. Small capitals are alternate capitals scaled down to the X height of the lowercase letters. They're also based on Renaissance models, and they're very, very useful for headings or when you have to set long strings of capitals in lowercase text. Figures is the typographic term for numerals or numbers, and OpenType Pro fonts often come with alternate sets of figures, lining figures which fit between a baseline and a top cap line, and then old style figures which have ascenders and descenders and are based on historic Renaissance models. Old style figures tend to look better in settings of text, and if you look at these two examples here of the same text, one up here has all standard size capitals and lining figures, and down here I've used caps and small capitals for the heading. You can see that in a text setting like this, that the old style figures and the small capitals flow more easily in the text setting and make for a more harmonious paragraph of text type. Some typefaces, such as Adobe Caslon Pro and Chaparral Pro, have lovely collections of ornaments that you can access through the Glyphs panel. There are special fonts for pictures and little symbols, such as Zoff dingbats and wingdings. These kinds of fonts are called dingbat fonts, or sometimes they're called sorts. And some decorative script fonts, such as Bickham Script Pro, have collections of flourishes that can be a great deal of fun to work with, and these also would be accessed through the Glyphs panel. We'll also be covering more advanced systems of typographic measurement, such as M's and N's, and learning the difference between typography and typing. If you would like to learn how to access some of these special typographic characters in a practical project, you might want to check out my playlist for creating a typographic sample book. And I also cover in that playlist how to set up a document to create an automatic table of contents like the one that you see here. So I hope that you have enjoyed this, and if you have a particular comment or if there are any other typographic topics that you'd like to hear me address, please leave some comments and requests in the comment section. And I wish you happy exploring of the marvelous wonderland that is digital typography.